Thank you guys for showing up. This is Fanfic to Fic, why writing fanfic helps an author hone their skills. And I'm going to throw it to our wonderful panelists.
Hi. Let's start with Bru.
Okay. So my name is Bru Baker. I've been writing gay fiction professionally for almost 10 years, but before that I wrote male in the Harry Potter fandom for a couple years. And really, I mean, I still adore it. I don't write fan fiction anymore, but I totally do still read it because it's kind of become my comfort place, you know. Yeah, so I wrote as Draco Softy, had a couple that were fairly popular and spawned some role-playing sites and stuff, which is pretty cool. I'm happy to be here. Rhys.
Me? Okay.
Yeah, we're all staring at you.
Oh, how could I tell? My name is Rhys Ford. And I should sense it. My name is Rhys Ford. I am an LGBTQ mystery, suspense, urban fantasy, paranormal romance writer. Before I did that, as a writer, I did, oh my gosh, K-drama, good grief, DBSK fanfic as Spawn, which was pretty decent, pretty popular. It's been translated in a lot of languages and was published as books. And before and during that, I did a lot of RPG fanfic, interactive, good grief, Highlander and other TV
Highlander,
shows.
Buffy, White Wolf. We had, what else did we have in there? We have Pretender.
Yeah.
We
had a lot. Yes, DBSK fanfic. I wrote under Spawn, which you can actually, I think, still find all of their books.
We did actually have Xena in a different. Our main one was the Highlander one, but we did have Xena as well.
So you have Xena. Damn, we did a lot actually, so it was a lot of fun.
I'm T.A. Moore. I write LGBTQ fiction. I write urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy, suspense, crime, and I forgot. I've written a contemporary, in which nobody died and only minor laws were broken, which I think qualifies. I also, before that, wrote fanfic for Highlander, Forever Night, Buffy, Supernatural, and Revolution NBC. It's very small fandom, so some of them still know me probably. So yeah, and I'm not telling you who I wrote as.
Oh yeah, Forever Night.
I'm still fingers crossed that Forever Night's going to get scooped up at the big reboot of 2021, because that would be awesome.
And I think kind of the way we've been doing our panels, since it's a lot about giving advice about writing, is, you know, through the chat. So we don't have a firm agenda or a presentation. You know, we could definitely talk about this forever, but yeah, if you want to send questions so we can kind of see where your interest is and what part you'd like to talk about, we're happy to do that. Because yeah, all three of us were, you know, pretty prolific, I think, fanfic authors who have transitioned into, you know, original fiction.
How did you get from writing fanfic to writing non-fanfic, transition to published work? Well, in my case, I kept wanting to tell my own stories, independent of the existing background and history that existed in the fanfic world. I wanted to be able to just go completely, no, I don't even have to be as you know, canon compliant as a coffee shop AU. I just wanted to tell my own stuff, and that's just, and one day I just went from writing fanfic to going, well, I think maybe I could actually write. And then I started, first one I wrote was The Even, which was a fairy tale where all the fairy tales go to die, basically. So
I'm not awake yet. My agenda right now is coffee. I totally lost question. How did I get from writing fanfic to writing original fiction? I kind of always wrote original fiction. I also was a long time storyteller for Vampire the Masquerade, which round table and not LARP. So it's kind of like improvisational theater and created world. I mean, I would do binders of worlds. I think Tam probably has one in her house somewhere.
I have the Hand Tokyo binder still.
Yeah.
I came across it when I was doing my big clear out of the
big purge. And I've always preferred to write personalities and characters in different settings and stuff like that. So I think it was just at a time when I wrote a few books before I decided to actually push one out to a publisher. And I don't want to like get ahead of myself. But I guess it's because I wrote a pretty much homogenized American, half Japanese detective who falls in love with a very culturally traditional Korean man who is also American. And it was really kind of a study of how the cultures both viewed homosexuality and what they dealt with and the struggle that they had trying to form a relationship. And that was kind of the whole series, was how they came together over those differences, told from both perspectives, from an American and a Korean standpoint, for gay men.
Well, I think for me, the way I knew, there are a couple questions here, but like, how did you know you were ready to transition? And also, transition. So I think those can kind of be combined a little bit. But for me, I started finding myself, and I was in Harry Potter, Merlin, and a couple others like that at the time. I started finding myself writing really long AU fics. Right. Like I was no longer interested in them being in the traditional setting. I wanted to do those coffee shop AUs. I wanted to, push them 30 years in the future or whatever and write about them as adults or something like that. And when I found, that I was successful at doing that, it kind of gave me that confidence to say, you know what, maybe I can make my own characters too. If I can make my own setting, with these borrowed characters, maybe I can also make my own characters. And for me, I think for most people who come from fanfic, I'm a really, really character-driven writer, because that's what makes me fall in love with a book series. So that's what I wanted, to be able to focus on in my own writing. But yeah, I think for me, when I started writing those AUs and saying, this isn't so bad, I can, push them into situations that were never in the original canon, and do it successfully, was kind of that moment that the light bulb went off that was like, I think I could do this with my own characters maybe. But I mean, it is a little bit scary. It's a totally different process. But I think the easiest way to transition, and I think at least Rhys does this as well, you kind of take that in fanfic. We had beta readers, you had people you'd push it to first. And that's not always super common in the original fiction world, but I still do that. And I think Rhys still does that. I don't know if Tam does, but just that concept of, having those beta readers or alpha readers, somebody to help you as you're going, so you get that feedback as you're writing, like you would with fan fiction, instead of just getting it all at the end where it's kind of overwhelming.
And I think the biggest thing I know there were some really good questions and I'm trying to combine them. Transitioning to the publishing world there's so many avenues that you can take. And if you go with the agent route, I think it's harder, because you're basically needing to convince somebody to sell your books. Will you get a better payoff? Possibly. maybe not. Not a lot of authors make good money, livable money, whether they're published by Big House, independent, however they do it. I think I think it's a better, it's easier to deal with in independent press. The pros for doing an independent press or a big house is that somebody else pays for the editing, somebody else pays for the covers. You know, a lot of that is done for you. You usually still have to market yourself regardless of where you are. And you have to be willing to give up some control. And some presses might be a good fit for you. Some presses might not be. You know, if you feel uncomfortable about something, speak up about it, listen to your editors, decide what hills to die on. We all have hills that we will die on. I will die on a cultural hill. You know, I won't whitewash or homogenize a Hawaiian or Japanese word, even an Irish word. I figure my readers are intelligent enough to either look it up or to be curious enough to look it up. But there's a lot of pushback sometimes for that. Self-publishing is a good route, but keep in mind, you need to find a really, really good editor. You need to find a really good cover artist. You have to invest time and money into that. And the payoff, of course, is that you do get all the royalties, unless you know, but you have to manage a lot and you have to be willing to do that work. It's good to find somebody who can mentor you through a self-publish. And people do self-pub kind of on the fly, but I think sometimes it shows. So if you're going to be a serious author, take the time, and you're going to want to spend the money on really good editor, really good proofreader, professional cover.
And if you don't take the time, if you throw the first book against the wall to see what sticks and it all goes terribly wrong, shake it off.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like my grand always said, I'll slap it in you and next time you'll do it better. Don't be discouraged if the first time doesn't work. If you make a mistake, everybody makes mistakes. I've made more than anybody knows about, because sometimes I just went, let's just pretend that didn't happen and hope nobody brings it up. So, you know, I think an awful lot of people get discouraged because they make a mistake, they make a misstep in some way, and then they just retreat and say, I'm never going to do this again. And that would be a terrible shame, because writing should be fun, and that's something that I learned from fanfic, because, you know, culturally, I should not be a writer. Over in Northern Ireland, my class, social status, it's very much I'm supposed to know my place, which sounds very old-fashioned, but it's like a whole political thing over here. It's how the DUP stuff. Anyway, and I was not encouraged to write. I mean, my immediate family, yeah, but my teachers and the people like that, they were like, no, you shouldn't write, you should just give up. And it was fanfic that gave me the encouragement to remember it was fun, to find my own voice, to get confident enough to go out there and give it a go. So I think, you know, that's the important thing. You know, everybody's made a mistake in fandom, and, you know, sometimes you just change your name and try again, and that's okay.
Yeah, you can do that in original fiction as well, you know, or if you want to write in many different streams, like you can have different pen names, like you're not boxed in. So
the thing to remember about writing is that it's going to take you time to get name recognition. And some people want that, some people don't want that. If you want to write for the love of writing, do it. I think the three of us love writing. We love storytelling. You know, it's hard not to read reviews. It's hard not to kind of get tossed by a 1-star comment.
That's the one difference. There's no flying monkeys in, or there shouldn't be, when you're sort of writing independent fiction. You know, you sort of just have to let let it just float over you.
Yeah, and once it goes out into the world, it goes out into the world. It could be your special kitten, but understand that beauty really is in the eye of the beholder. And not every book is for everyone. Find your voice, find your hill, and most of all, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself as much as you enjoy fanfic.
I was just going to say, I saw a question from Julie there who was asking about world building, which I think that sort of find your voice, it feeds into that. And also, Julie, that was a really good question. And you win a gift card for that. So
I was going to do that. We've all decided each of us is going to pick one question out of the chat throughout this the session to award a gift card to. And yeah, Tam totally.
It's a $10 Amazon gift card. We'll just arrange that when at the end we'll get your email so we can send it to you. So Julie, I hope you're still here.
Yes.
Yeah, she is. But yes, because Rhys was saying, you have to find your own voice when you're moving into original fiction, and part of that is learning how to world build. I don't think it's people always act like fanfic is ruining authors because they're depending on existing properties rather than doing their own world building. But I think that shows that they haven't really delved into fanfic, because sure, the core fanfic is we're telling a story within the world that somebody else built, but Supernatural had it's supernatural, but everybody's an elf. They have wings, they have tails, they all the world building is spawned off from the core world that they were created, and there's alternate realities, there's Elseworlds, there's everything happens, and people do work. That's world building. That's how you world build. So it's not a new skill that people have to learn when they go from fanfic to professional. It's just an extension of an existing skill.
I also think a lot of people don't understand that even writing something set in modern day now, a mystery, anything that you write, you're world building. You're really choosing to share bits and pieces of the world, and that sets the tone of what you're writing. If you are writing, say, a noirish mystery, you're going to want to talk about the atmosphere of the street around you. You talk about, cigarettes, lying in the dirty alleyway, and someone's pissed against the wall and the place reeks, and a cat, scrawny, runs across and throws a shadow across the face of the person that he's talking to. All of that is world building. You're setting the background and the tone of your dialogue. Everything that you do is world building. You do it judiciously as much as you can. I would say avoid info dumps, like, as you know, Bob, dragons do XYZ. Don't necessarily lecture or expound to the reader, but weave things in. Bob could look up and go, oh my God, that's a prismatic dragon. Those are one of my favorites because they do XYZ. You can fill the reader in slowly. It's a slow spoonful. And you could take time to set the scene in the beginning of each chapter, or at the beginning of a scene, or even, I walk through, your main character walks through the door of an opium den, and he can just, he or she, first POV or even third POV, take a couple paragraphs and describe what they see. That's world building. A lot of it is just choosing what to share with the reader.
Yeah, and I think, we, especially coming from fanfic where you have all of these shortcuts, like you said, that people know what this character is like, they know what this setting is like, and so you don't have to spend your time building that. But we have that in original fiction as well. Every genre has tropes, and you can really lean on those. So, just like you might write that coffee shop AU for your supernatural fandom, if you're writing a book about, you know, a coffee shop waitress and, you know, a crime that happened in the alley, you already have a lot of that world building. Somebody who's picking up that book knows what to expect. So you don't need to explain that, oh, she has no experience in solving crimes, but now she's got to, you know, make sure that they don't arrest her boss because they think he did it. So, you know, really leaning into those tropes can help you shortcut a lot of the world building. If you're writing, you know, a werewolf, you know, story, people understand werewolves. So you might need to give a few hints about how your werewolves are different, or, you know, if the moon affects them or things, but you don't have to completely start from scratch and explain what the concept of a werewolf is, because your reader's going to know. So I think that really helps to lean into those tropes, and you can have a book that has multiple tropes. But that's kind of that contract with the reader that says, hey, this is going to be about this, like, or, you know, if I'm writing a romance, it's going to have a happy ending. If I'm writing a mystery, then something, you know, bad is going to happen and we're going to solve it. You're going to have that resolution in the end. So, you know, leaning into that, I think, helps with that uncertainty with the world building, because you kind of already have a structure there. You get to fill it in, but you're not building the structure as well.
I've got 2 questions that I'm going to give favorites to when you're done with this topic.
I was just going to say that, however, one just basic practical part about learning world building is, until you become really, really popular, nobody is going to make their own wikis for your world. So if you're making a major change to something that's established in the world, or anything like that, you have to make your own notes and remember them, because I have at least once, just once, been pulled up because I had a character come back in and go, hey guys, what y'all doing? And my editor was like, I'm sure they're surprised because you killed him 2 books ago. And so so you need to keep a record of that. Killed Jim.
Yeah, always remember who you kill. I'm actually going to give 2 cards away. I'll pay for both of these. It's mine. Laura Pennington and Vanilla Hiver. So BL, those are the 2 that I would like to. And the reason I'm doing 2 is because they both kind of put close to the same question together at the same time. Do we feel there are more obstacles to publish fantasy, paranormal, LGBT works than heterosexual central? And have you experienced discrimination as someone who writes stories with LGBTQ characters? You guys want to take a stab, or do you want me?
The first one, I would say definitely. I mean, not as much as there used to be, more than there should be. You know, the publishing industry is a business. So if you're wanting to go the traditional publishing route, you know, the big house, the agent, the big houses, the you know, big advances, hopefully, then you're going to hit a little bit more. You're going to struggle more. People will be asking you, you know, why would Mabel in, you know, the Midwest want to read this? And the answer is maybe Mabel has more, you know, interest in these things than you realize. But you have to be willing to fight that corner. It's easier when you're an independent because you can publish what you want, but you still could get pushback on it from people. I know you've seen, but you know, I've seen, you know, other authors. I get very little hate mail because I'm very lazy, and I have got hate mail that I've missed for like 6 weeks and felt bizarrely guilty about not answering. But I've seen authors who get hate mail or who get reviews. It's like, oh my God, I was really enjoying this book, but then their penises touched Mabel, and I just threw it aside in disgust. And you're like, maybe you just didn't read the back blurb. But you know, there are people like that. There are people like that out there, and if you're writing LGBTQ fiction, you have to deal with them, and you have to be, you know, just ready to go, you're a sad, pathetic little man, and you're not important to me. And I have the privilege of being able to do that because they're very unlikely to travel to Northern Ireland.
I mean, I think we've all had the experience too of going to conferences, being on panels, speaking in places, going to book signings, and having even among other authors, them saying, oh, you write in this, you know, and it happens to all genre fiction, I think, not just LGBTQ, but, oh, you write romance. Oh, well, you write cozy mysteries, you know, and then it's kind of othering. And they say, well, you know, I'm writing the great American novel. And it's like, well, you do you, I'm writing what I like. And I think I get a lot of internal strength from the fact that I'm writing what I want to write. And, you know, I know it's not for everybody, but I like it. And I think this is another place that fanfic can kind of give you, you know, that thicker skin, because all of us have been blasted for, you know, something you wrote in fanfic, somebody hates something, people are mean, and you just kind of have to brush that aside and really write for yourself and make, you know, if you're proud of what you wrote, then it doesn't matter what Mabel, you know, thinks about your writing. But it does really annoy people, because I've done that too, where I didn't catch the hate mail that came in, and like 6 weeks later they check back in. They're like, you saw that, right? It's like, actually I didn't, but I'm sorry you didn't like it. And I think in terms of getting published, you have to be more selective in who you're submitting to. You know, really find that agent or that publishing house that does publish works like you want to write and whose authors you admire. That's something I did. There were very few publishing houses that were publishing LGBTQ romance, you know, when I came onto the scene, you know, 10, 12 years ago. And so I wrote to a couple of the authors I really admired, and I said, hey, you know, do you like your publisher? What are some of the issues you have with your publisher? And was able to find a place that felt like home and that I really was proud to be a part of. So I would recommend doing something like that too. You just definitely have to do your research to make sure that you're pitching it in the right place, because, you know, if you're pitching your really awesome sci-fi novel to Harlequin, they're probably not going to take it, because, you know, they do category romance. So you just kind of have to know and do that research about where this would fit best, and then aim for that.
There are some huge obstacles. I have an urban fantasy series called the Kai Grayson series. It is set in a world where the Underhill and Earth have merged, and it's following the war between basically the elves and the humans. And the main character is an elf that was raised by a human being, and so really he is another. He forgets he's actually from back the other side. And he's bisexual, and he's unapologetically bisexual. He does have a relationship building within the series, but he, I make no bones about the fact that he's attracted to both men and women. And there's no graphic sex, and especially, I mean, it's urban fantasy, and it's the beginning of the books. The first book, there was nothing besides him being bisexual, and having a boyfriend at one point, discussing these things. And the book went to different agents, because I decided, I'm going to go traditional route. I was naive. I had high hopes. And I got inquiries back from 4 to 6 agents, 6 total, who said that they would take the book and be happy to sell the book if I would change Kai to female, so he wasn't bisexual, and he wouldn't be bisexual, so that the love interest would be male and Kai would be female. That disappointed me, and I eventually said, no, this is not for me. I wanted to write what I wanted to write. It wasn't, that's a hill you got to decide to die on. And that was kind of where I planted my flag and went, nope, not gonna. Kai is being published, and he has been published. In fact, the guy who did covers is the same guy who did Jim Butcher and Shannon, I can never pronounce her last name, first name, Sinead McGuire, October Day series. Chris McGrath is the artist. And it's been successful. It's been a successful series. And I'm glad I took that choice and ran with my choice instead of other people's. We're going to get pushback for writing LGBTQ characters. You're going to get pushback for writing characters that aren't white. A lot of my characters aren't white. Someone the other day pointed out to me that my Dirty Kiss series, my Dirty series is predominantly minorities in one way or another, either ethnic or sexual, minorities. But the thing is I write the world that I live in. So, or I write the world that I want to live in, or I write the world that I want to imagine. And you just sort of have to make those choices and decide what you want to accomplish and what you want to say. And there's no wrong or right answer. You could choose to write, a heterosexual couple and go publishing, go independent press, go self-pub. Just write what satisfies you. And sometimes you are going to have to pick battles. And I think that was just when the three of us decided that we were going to pick. Because we're stubborn that way.
And I mean, I think, Rhys and I both as non-white writers, I wanted to write books that had people that look like me, that had my life experiences. And that's been a struggle. I did my first probably 10 books did not have a minority in them because that's not, it was a hard enough sell that they were gay, but, a gay non-white person. So, but, as I got more confidence in the industry and had more books under my belt, it became a fight that I was willing, to fight more, and defend that. No, I want to have, not even just write this Asian character, but I want this Filipino guy on my cover because, a lot of publishers are very, yes, we want to have diverse fiction. Go ahead and write that, that Hapa character, that, African-American character, but we want to put the white partner on the cover of the book. And that was a battle that I drew my line in the sand there. Same with, neurotypical and neurodivergent. I have a book with a neurodivergent character, and that was very difficult to get through the editing process without people trying to insert, things that were incorrect, stereotypes, things like that. It's like, no, you know what story you want to tell. And I think those are the stories that mean the most to people when they can see themselves in a book. So when you have that kind of story to tell, definitely be prepared for battle, but stick with it.
And I think even Tammy has gotten pushback on cultural insertion in her books.
A couple of times when I've pulled the full Irish out on them. And there's also a cultural element to how I approach writing magic or the supernatural, which we have all had fights about before because those two are joyless. But no, there's a cultural approach that the Irish took to supernatural, which was that it was just very much you'll walk around the corner and you'll be in the other world, and whereas the other world and this world were not really separate, but were overlapping. So that's how I approach a lot of the magic or the supernatural elements in my books, because that's the culture, the folklore that I grew up with. And I've had pushback on that, where people are like, that makes no sense, why didn't he pass through something? He wasn't, thrown into another type of thing. And I'm like, oh no, but that's just how magic works. And so I've had pushback on that and the names and things like that. So
trying to find a less white, bleached out angle.
And sorry. The Morrigan, I've had a lot of arguments about the Morrigan because everybody wants you to make her evil, and she was not evil. She was complicated.
Like Pele.
I mean, she would mess your shit up if you crossed her, but if you didn't cross her, she would not go out of her way to mess your shit up. It just might happen anyway.
We should probably get off of this topic because we went way long.
Oh, yes.
Did the three of you study at 10 college for literature? or was writing turned a
I
hobby
did.
or career?
A little bit of both. I always wrote, like I was saying earlier. I mean, one of my teachers once described my writing as lurid and disgusting. So I hadn't felt the confidence to go into writing as a career when I started, and then I just started sort of edging into it. I was writing fanfic with Rhys and the Five, and then I went back to university to study English. And then I went to, which I already had a history degree, so my mum was convinced I was never going to leave the flipping university. And then I started writing. I worked for the Creative Writers Network. I worked in marketing and PR, and gradually then I went into full-time writing. So it was a mixture of, I studied writing and I learned how to write online. And to be absolutely honest with you, they were both amazingly helpful. I found working in a university environment with other writers and established writers, learning the sheer technique and the craft of it was really helpful. It was really useful. If I hadn't had fanfic, it would also have killed any interest that I had in writing, because it was just so intense, and it was such a rigorous writing process, because they were told you were going to do this. You have to sit in the classroom and just be given critical feedback, which was sometimes quite harsh. One guy told me I shouldn't write again until I'd read all of Russian literature, which I thought would take a long time. So it was so helpful, but it would have killed my interest in writing fanfic. Where in writing, if I hadn't had fanfic where I was getting to just write whatever I wanted, write as much as I wanted, I was getting immediate feedback from people who did not say, this is unbelievable, this is, you should write proper literature, not, sci-fi or fantasy or whatever. And they encouraged where the others challenged. And at the same, and fanfic can be challenging as well, because, there's a lot of amazing writers. And when you're writing and you're reading the other fanfic, you're really sort of challenging yourself. So I think for me, it was both. I talked a lot there, sorry.
Well, you're the only one of us that has a degree in it, so it makes sense that you would talk more. I have degrees in political science and journalism, so I came up through journalism, newspapers, which I think has served me really, really well, because I have a really thick skin about edits. In a newsroom, you don't have time to be crying and upset if somebody wants you to change something. And that's really helped me, when I'm getting edits back from my editors, that I can divorce myself a little bit from, this is my baby, and say, okay, well, you're totally right. I'm horrible about commas. I brought a lot of bad habits in from fan fiction, things that we do often in fan fiction, or I did 10 years ago. I don't know, I'm not writing fan fiction now, but just things that are accepted in fan fiction that, we don't generally, the editors don't like to see. My worst was autonomous body parts, his hand cupped and then, I got that beaten out of me. It took like 3 years. Because that was all of, something that I brought.
I still get the autonomous body part, the APD.
Yeah, no, they abbreviate it just for extra shame, because they know we know what they're talking about. But yeah, so I, have been writing my whole life, but it wasn't necessarily fiction. So I think any kind of writing, whether it's creative writing or not, that you have experience with helps, just because it helps you with the process.
My area of study and degrees are psychology and cultural studies, anthropology, with an emphasis on Pacific Rim, none of which helped me write fanfic. And oddly enough, it's not what I do for a living either, because while I love the study of cultures and while I love comparative cultures, I didn't want to live in that ivory tower, because that's kind of where you have to live. Instead, I decided to chuck that all and do something worse than being a writer, and that's being a graphic designer. But it's doing something that I like to do, the puzzle of it and everything else. I come from a family of liars, pretty much. and storytelling is kind of, I think, in the bones of my culture, and I enjoy it. So I don't even really think of it as writing. A lot of times you have storytellers in your family, you know, that one person that everyone wants to sit and listen to. The only difference is that we write those things down. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to figure out if you want to be a storyteller. Craft is absolutely fantastic to know. Knowing how to write a different voice. In fact, this is a good segue into writing voices and writing styles, because the biggest thing that you need to find is how you write. Now, you might think, oh, I sound like everybody else, or and I think there was a question about, I'm going to back this up, and I missed one too.
My transcription just caught that as, instead of let's back this up, it went, as a Baptist, which sounds like the start of a
it does. Somebody had asked questions about, you know, basically how do you establish your voice and try to combine things. I would say I have a very distinct voice. Part of it probably has to do with, you know, I've got Asperger's and I write weird. Part of it has to do with my culture, how I phrase things, how I see things. I think the thing to remember is try not to homogenize your writing. Don't become the television anchor for the news. You know, everybody sounds like they're from the Midwest America. Really work in your differences, really explore your world, really choose and explain what you see. Dialogue, have the dialogue sound as close to somebody talking as possible, but do it as how you hear it. I think if you establish your own voice, you can continue that voice even through different genres. Yeah, you can read. I'm fairly confident, or I've been told, no matter, and sometimes to a detriment. Oh, you could tell Rhys Ford wrote this. And it's both a compliment. I think it is a compliment. Because it's you. It will be you. It's how you dress, it's how you style yourself, it's what your beliefs are, it's what your thoughts are, it's where you put your heart. And I think developing your own voice and letting yourself have a voice will definitely elevate your writing.
At the same time, I'd say don't worry about your voice at the start. Yeah. Because you're not going to have your own voice yet. You're going to have, you know, you'll read somebody. I still can't read Rhys's stuff if I'm writing in the same genre, because we wrote together for a long time in the RPG. So when I read her stuff, I still tend to mirror it a little bit. But
mirror. That was mirror for all of those that don't speak Irish. She's gonna flip me off. She wants to flip me off.
Sorry. When you start out writing, you borrow writing from you borrow the style from other people. I disappeared there. You borrow the style from other writers that you admire. You sort of pick up little bits and hints from people around you, and that's how you develop your own voice, because you work your way through all these other elements, all these tones and phrases, and you just keep writing, and eventually one day you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh, I've got a voice now. I think my voice is fairly distinct usually. I do write, like, urban fantasy tends to be a little bit more Irish, yeah, than my crime, but my voice is fairly distinct, and that just happens with practice and writing and keeping my fingers to the keys.
would you guys say that the voice is really kind of your accent, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, and your outlook on things. You know, I have a very, very different voice than either of you, but
She's
but
a
I've
nice
been
one.
carry that through different genres, you know, and even when I'm like, no, this one's going to be angsty, and they kind of pat me on the head and they say, sure, sure it is, you know, but that's okay. And you cultivate readers who like that, and they'll follow you for your voice. They'll follow you through different genres. You know, the greatest compliment is to see a review that said, you know, this isn't something I'd normally read, but Rhys Ford wrote it, and so I'm going to give it a try. That's a great compliment, I think, for us when we see that. And that means that you have found your voice, probably. But yeah, it's not something you can force, and you shouldn't, you know, worry about it obsessively. It will, the more you write, the more clear to you it will become what your voice is. So it's just a practice kind of thing.
You enter into a contract with your readers, and as you grow your audience, you're asking them to have faith that you are going to deliver consistently. Some things fail, some things, you know, not really fail per se, but just don't find that audience. I cannot write fluffy romance. And there's nothing wrong with fluffy romance. I can't write it. I tried. It did not, it's not that it didn't go well. It's just that what's fluffy for me apparently isn't what 98% of the world considers fluffy. So, Bru's gonna laugh at me. Mm-hmm. Did I enjoy that book? Did I love writing that book? Yes. Did it turn out to be one of the possibly most angst-ridden book I've ever written? Yes. So I think kind of accepting also what you like to write. That's important for voice. Do you have anything else, Sam?
For the record, I'm ducking in and out of screen because I tried to replace one of my plug sockets the other day and it didn't go well, and I thought I'd fixed it, but apparently what happened was I'd fused it and now it's dead. And so I'm just ducking in and out of screen, plugging in my external car. So if anybody's wondering what I was doing, that was it.
There's a lot of questions. Does somebody else want to grab one?
I'm going to grab one and give my gift card to Evelyn. How can you mesh, or not, sorry, that was not the right, where did it go? It scrolled at me.
I think it's
how do you go about sex scenes in your books? Do you even have sex scenes? I realize fanfic can be quite explicit and graphic. How explicit? Oh, it scrolled again. How
I can read it to you
get in case you write sex scenes in your books?
And BL, if we give out extra, we'll just, we're going to be giving out all sorts of, just.
No worries. I've been contacting the winners as we've been going.
Thank you.
So we're good.
Yeah,
we'll be handing them out. So we'll tally it up, and we're silly to think it was going to be 3.
Yeah, it's we're like Oprah in here.
Yeah, we're Oprah. You get a car. Sorry.
Yes. But so the sex scenes. I generally in my professional fiction am pretty tame. Not very many sex scenes. They can be explicit, but not overly so. I was the kinkiest, dirtiest, most lurid fanfic author like out there. I wrote one that was literally just like 25 chapters of every kink any reader could give me, and I made the characters do that. So yeah, it's different. For me, I just found that like I enjoyed the plot and the character development more, and so I, with my voice, which is very different than my fanfic voice, ended up going pretty light on, you know, on the sex scenes and the detail. But there are also people who write extremely lurid, graphic sex, and it sells really well. So you just have to decide, you know, what fits with that voice of yours, what fits with the genre you want to write in. You know, it can be limiting. I've kind of branched into category romance. They're shorter, they're sweeter. You can't have a gangbang in, you know, in a category romance. So the genre that you push into is going to kind of dictate, you know, how much sex you can have. When I came in from fanfic, the notes I was getting from my editors, it was like, okay, well, maybe we don't need this extra sex scene. And now, you know, the notes I get from my editors are like, really, we're 20 chapters in and they haven't had sex? Like, maybe this is a romance, right? So, you know, I think that can change over time. And yeah, the Omegaverse. So there is, in gay fiction, there is absolutely Omegaverse, and people love it. They love MPreg and Omegaverse. But in my werewolf series, I actually felt like, you know, coming from fan fiction and knowing that people like Omegaverse, MPreg, had to say that there would be no ass babies, you know, like in this series, that I wasn't writing that. But there are plenty of people who do. But, you know, that's just, I think, another thing, that when you find your voice, Bru Baker's voice probably wouldn't write ass babies. And if I were to do that, which I have done in fanfic, but if I were to do that, I would probably do it under a different pen name, just because I don't want my readers to be like, what the hell is this? Like, you know, like you don't ever write like this. So I think what can be limiting for that is like just the bounds of what you're comfortable with. My fanfic was never going to be discovered by my family. It was fine. But I didn't want to go to preschool pickup and have the other mother know, you know, that I was writing sounding. So when I started writing original fiction, I toned it down a lot. But yeah, that's just another thing to be true to yourself. Write what you want to write, but make sure that you're marketing in the right places for what you're writing.
Somebody asked, would it be reasonable to go through the entire process of publishing an original work without intent of making a profit? Like to invest in the time, money for the sake of self-satisfaction, or would you all consider a waste? I think you've got to go in knowing you're not going to make a profit.
Or at least willing to accept. I mean, we all go in willing to accept we're not going to make a profit, but I think we all hope we will. I mean, in this room. I would not do that if I didn't think I was going to make a profit on my professional fiction and I was having to invest money in it. I would probably just stick to fanfic, which I get the immediate gratification from. But at the same time, if somebody just wants to write something and put it out into the world, that's up to, I'm extremely mean. I am very Ulster Scot. But I wouldn't judge anybody else for doing it, because what you're writing is your voice and it's important to you. And even if you're only writing fanfic, your time has value. If you go to work every day, your boss places a premium on your time and he pays you for it. And when you're writing, the time you take out of your life, away from your family, away from, you know, walking your dogs or eating biscuits while staring at the TV, that has value. That's your investment that you're putting into that book. So whether you're writing professional fiction or you're writing a 165K alternate universe story, alternate history of the world you're writing a fanfic for, which I did, that's time, that's money, that's an investment, whether you then go on to pay an editor for it or not. So I've invested probably thousands in writing fanfic, that the ego and the appreciation of the people who read it was the only pay I got for it. And I did not care because I really enjoyed doing it.
Should we stare pointedly at Bru?
Yes, that's what I'm doing. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted different things out of fanfic than I did for professional fiction. So no, I don't do any of my professional fiction, you know, for free. That's not to say that I wouldn't write something and have it edited and put it out for free, but it's going to be a magnet for other books. It's going to be, you know, to get somebody interested in my writing so that they will go and buy from my catalog. But yeah, with fanfic, I mean, thousands and thousands of hours, you know, I have well over 1 million words, you know, written in my fanfic stuff as Draco Softy, but I did it for the community, and you know, I just felt so accepted, and I was getting a lot back for that. It just wasn't money. But yeah, it's now that I can kind of value my time for like actual money as a professional author. I don't write fanfic anymore, both because I'm not really wanting to write for free, but also because I feel like I've switched in my brain, and I don't know that I could go back to that. I think the closest thing that I've ever done is if I'm really stuck on a project or I need to do something quickly, you know, on a deadline. Back in the very early days, I used to say, okay, well, let's pretend it's going to be fanfic and, you know, borrow things from characters that I liked or had written, and looked at it as fanfic. And I could, because I can write fanfic way faster than I can write original fiction. Even when I was writing AUs, it doesn't make any sense. You know, what you consider prolific for a fanfic author versus a professional author is really different. You know, I'd have no problem busting out 120K, you know, fanfic in like a month, you know, because you're just so interested in it, you're passionate about it, you're getting constant feedback. And that doesn't happen, you know, as much in the professional world.
You're writing 3 different stories at once that have nothing to do with each other, set in different worlds, running the entire, you know, wiki of all these different things in your head at the same time, and that's fine.
Yeah, no problem. But now I have trouble when I'm, you know, writing one manuscript, editing on another, and then doing a promo tour on a third. I literally have to have Post-it notes on my computer that tells me who's involved in which of these books and what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't know why that is, because yeah, I was much better at that multitasking, you know, as the fanfic author. But
I think the biggest thing is that being a published author is that it's actually 2 jobs. It's one is writing, which we all love. When you're a writer, that's your creative part of it. But then there's also the author part. And the author part is when the book is finished. The author part edits, the author part does, you know, when you put your author hat on, you've got to think about marketing, you've got to think about brand, you've got to think about, you know, Facebook. How are you going to maintain your Facebook group? What are you doing on Twitter? How are you, you know, how are you connecting with readers? Oh, and that's Badger behind us, so, you know, ignore him.
It just gives you such a look.
He does give you such a look. Ignore him. It's the author part deals with the business portion of being a published author. And it's making sure that and how you interact, you know, are you polite on social media? Are you accessible? Do you listen to people and build relationships, and God forbid networking? The 3 of us are very good friends. We're very close, and we're all fairly informal. I don't think we take ourselves so seriously.
Badger has stolen the limelight of this Zoom conference.
That's Badger.
He's like, no, he's the star. Just move out of the way, all of you.
Here, I'll just move aside so you can see Badger. There. Okay.
And for the record, somebody was saying he is extremely soft. He's one of those great big fluffy balls of cat. Just bury your fingers in. He is a beautiful cat.
But he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But
like I can touch him, I can cuddle him, but he's an asshole. And you might see Gojira, who is our newest cat, and she also is an asshole. But they're assholes together, and they're very happy. And Harley is a chinchilla-like cat, and she's very sweet. I think that's the hardest part about transitioning from fanfic to published author is actually having to do that author part. The author part sucks your time.
And your soul.
Sucks it. And your soul. Because you have to do it. I mean, nobody's going to give you a world tour. Your publisher might be able to get you to events. The 3 of us, you know, have been lucky enough to attend the Paris Book Fair, the Salon de Louvre, LA Times Book Festival, Gay Brum Lit, the German
World
Book
Fantasy Con,
World Fantasy Con, the UK Meet,
yeah,
Bosher Con. What else have you?
Oh, I said Shimmer.
Shimmer. And we're also able to do things like the Police Writers Academy.
I haven't done that yet, and I'm super jealous, and I'm going to do it.
We're going to do it.
I want to go to a body farm. I think it will help me. I won't.
A body farm is good. I think, and the three of us
No,
probably
she
should do
doesn't.
it together.
She doesn't say she thinks it will help her writing. She just says she thinks it will help
It'll
her.
help her. The fluffy person wants to go to the body farm. The two of us are like, yeah.
You've already been.
Do you know what they also do is this is totally an offside, is they have a vulture tour where they strap carrion to a Jeep and they drive it through a vulture reserve. So the vultures come down and eat like the dead meat, the dead animals.
Vultures are apparently one of the most intelligent of the raptors.
They're very sweet.
They're because most raptors are just very focused on find, hunt, kill, but because the vultures are more of a playing a waiting game, they've developed more sort of social skills.
Yes, they have much more social skills. I should probably find another. So hopefully we answered that.
I don't even remember what the question was before we got on to carrion. But
I don't know. See, once you start talking about dead bodies and carrion,
goes out of my head.
Carrion.
But that's the kind of research, that you can do that's fun to do. But yeah, I want to go to a body farm.
There's kind of a are we still writing fanfic? I don't write fanfic because those words can go to original stuff.
I don't have time.
I don't have time. I really just don't have time.
Some writers, I mean, I was really prolific as a fanfic writer. Original fiction takes me longer because you have mostly because I have to finish the book before I can send it off and get it edited and published. And then finally people will say nice things to me about it. And then sometimes people say nasty things too, but I ignore that mostly. There's not that immediate, so you can get it out and get people stroking you.
You are always, I think, and the thing is you're always doing four things. You're always writing, you're always editing so you're like almost working on 3 books and you're branding at the same time.
Yeah.
You're writing one, you're editing one, you're marketing one, because that's how the timeline goes. And then you're dealing with your brand. You're dealing with.
I remember a couple of Christmases ago, I'd finished a book just before Christmas, and then there was Christmas, and then I was telling you I was being really indulgent and taking time off until the new year to just do nothing except work on my admin and get my branding up on my website. I get the website all set up, and you were like, "No, you're still working." That's working. That's not time off.
Yeah, if you're only choosing one stream to work on, that's not time off. And Bru's got kids, and Tammy's got a dog that she spoils horribly. Spoil rotten. So there's no room usually for fanfic.
I do miss it.
Yeah.
I miss having because I miss being in fandom. I miss the passion for the world and the bouncing ideas of the other fans. People are going, "Oh, you should try this," and doing it. I did the Merry Month of Masturbation once. Every day it's May, isn't it? May's Merry Month. So every day in May, I wrote a fic where one of the characters was, touching themselves inappropriately. And it was so much fun. And now it would kill me to write that many sex scenes in a month. I would just die.
Jimmy's asked this twice, so now I've been trying to get to it. How can you mesh your more experimental original fiction with formulaic fan fiction? My writing style for original stories is vastly different, but I want to find a way to bring it to my fan fiction.
I'd say just try it. Don't be there going, "Oh, well, this doesn't work, I'm going to give up." I have spent quite a few, books where I start them off. I write the first chapter and it's not right, and I go back and I tweak it and I write it again. Not often because I don't have the patience for that, but you need to find just the right way to enter the story, to enter the style of writing you want to do. And once you do that, it'll click. But you just have to keep trying. Yeah, it's like anything else. You have to fail a dozen times before you can succeed once.
Yeah, I think Rhys and I have both, had the experience. I know we've talked about it, where I might be 4 chapters in, I'm really struggling with it. And then I realize, well, shit, this is where I start. So those 4 chapters have to go in the trash. And now it flows because now I'm in the right place. So yeah, I think, you have to be willing. The difference between, and when I wrote fanfic, I write it, I maybe have one beta that I'm like poking, like, let's go. And then I post it, like, so it was a serial. So was used to that constant, that feedback, but then also that locks you in. So you're 4 chapters in and you realize you were in the wrong place, you got to make it work. But whereas with original fiction, if you're not serializing it, you can, go back and say, okay, well, actually, that dog is a donkey and the main character is a fisherman. Why did I think he was? So you're not as locked in. But also, I never throw anything away. So if I go back, those 4 chapters go into a file and I may use them in something else later. I don't that kind of goes, I think, to the we don't write for free, anymore. It's like anything I write, I try to keep because I might be able to be inspired for something else or use it for something else, or, it starts a new project, or maybe it just sits there, but I feel better that I didn't delete it.
A bit of a digression, but I used to know somebody who wrote like serious literary fiction, and whenever they finished a manuscript, they'd print it out, like pure old school, they'd print it out and then they'd put it in the freezer and they'd freeze it so that then they could edit it, but they knew that the original pure version of what they'd been working for was safely stored in the freezer.
Some people are crazy.
Yeah.
Could you imagine my freezer full of dead body books?
You have to have like 20. You have to lines up in the backyard.
I've got like 40 books. Could you imagine?
So
What's in there
that I want to jump on? Have you ever written a story you absolutely love, but no one would publish it? Yes. Here, I will show you what I do. Hold on. So in here, these are all origami based on rejection letters from publishers. So, when I use that, it's a learning experience, but I keep it in the corner of my office so that I always see it, because, you can always be rejected. It doesn't make you a bad author. It doesn't make it a bad book. It means that it wasn't in the right place. So most of those have been published by, subsequent publishers, but some of them haven't. And they're just, still maybe my darlings, but they're just mine. I don't get to share them. And we could publish them for free or something. I just have not kind of gotten into the self-publishing.
I have books that people, like the Kai Grayson series. I've had acceptance letters, but basically, like we talked about before, change him to a she, make it heterosexual, and we'll take it, run with it. And my response, of course, to that was, "Fuck you." To be fair, that's usually my response to a lot of things.
It wasn't going to say it. I thought it.
Right. That's how you Bruzel. That's kind of like your default response. Actually, my default response is, "Fuck you, watch me." Because it was, then it became, "Fuck you, I'm going to make it happen." And Kai is out there and doing very well. And I think sometimes that's the best validation you can have, is even if it didn't do very well, if it's your baby and you have a lot of faith in it and you think it's representative of a part of you that you want to have out there as a legacy for your voice, get it out there however you can. Get it out there professionally. Make it something you're proud of. I have books that you will either love or absolutely hate. I have a book called Ink and Shadows, which is basically an urban fantasy, sort of, about a guy who, through an event, ends up crossing through the veil and interacting with immortals, like the Four Horsemen, and faith and peace, and a really conceptual manifestations of how mankind survives, as well as monsters and everything else. It's a long book. It's a very angsty book. And it's very graphic and very gritty. And people have hated it. But it's mine. And I'm proud of it. And I'm glad it's out there. Other people love it. Maybe they need help. I don't know.
It's one of my favorites, and I'm like, you know, fluffy over here, but yeah, it's really gritty and dark. I could never write it. I would never try, but it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a very complicated book, and I have allergies like hell today. It's a very complicated book, and would I write another one like it? Yes, I would want to, but it takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of energy. It takes up a lot of brain. It takes up a lot of soul. But sometimes you're going to write that book that does take a lot of soul. And that's when you need to really decide if you're going to say, fuck it, and just put it out there. And I would recommend doing that, even if it's just to satisfy that part of you. But put it out as cheaply as you can. Don't spend thousands of dollars. And somebody asked, is there websites or stuff that can help you self-publish? Hundreds.
Personally,
Do not pay to be published.
No, you'll pay to be, if you're self-publishing, you're going to pay, but you will be paying discreetly. Each discrete thing, you can do it yourself. Do not pay anybody to do it for you until you've priced it all out, worked out what you need done. And then if somebody's offering a good price to do that and take it off your hands, then you can do it. But don't just take the first person who says, I'll publish you if you give me this amount of money, because they're always scammers, really.
Yeah, those are scammers. And if you self-pub, I would say self-pub, because that way the money comes directly to you.
But if you're looking for self-pubbing, I would say don't depend. You can use it's like when you're at university and you're looking up sources, you can use Wiki or something as a jump-off point and to start building where you're going to go and look for your original sources. But don't depend on that. Go to the original person who could say what your quote. So don't depend on the websites or anything like that. Use them as a resource, but go to the groups, go to the forums, go to the other authors who do it. Most other authors who self-pub are really friendly. They're really eager to help other people who are getting started. They don't want you to make the same mistakes they did. They want people to thrive, and they will help you and get you started and get you tell you what tools you need, tell you where to go and get everything, and help you out. So I'd go to the authors first and then go out from there.
Yeah. Somebody asked, what writing program do you use?
Google Docs.
Word.
I use Word and Google Docs. Yeah.
Microsoft Word. I'm not saying Word, but you know.
I tried.
Rhys is against Google Docs.
I'm not against it. It's just annoying.
Well, but if you write in multiple places on multiple things,
because I used to be writing at work at lunchtime in the closet they made to eat in because I was not a vegetarian. So I'd be sitting there writing away on my my iPad or my Apple or the work computer, and then I'd come home and I'd get it all. Because I remember when I had to email it back and forth to myself, and that was dreadful. You'd send it and then it wouldn't come through. You'd forget to press send and you'd be looking for it everywhere, fixing the formatting.
I think it really depends. Somebody says, I know a lot of fellow authors use Scrivener. I do not like Scrivener.
I like Scrivener, but not as a writing tool. I think I have not been diagnosed with anything, but I think we've all sort of done the ADHD tests. And possibly as far as I know, I am entirely neurotypical. I was tested for a lot of things when I was a kid, but there's sort of like, I get distracted. If there's a tool there that I can sit in and go through, and I can spend all my time making this amazing and beautiful layout that I'm going to use one day to write a book, that's what I'll do instead of writing. I like Google Docs because it doesn't give me too many options. I have a few fonts I can pick. I can just twiddle my tabs, and that's about it. Give me more options than that, and that's what I'll do. Spend all day just fiddling.
I'll use it as a procrastination tool. Someone had asked about what kind of research we do, and that's under the same thing. I think depending on what you're writing, you might have to do a large amount of research, but you know, for me, I can get lost in that and use that as like I'm writing, but I'm not writing. I'm researching, I'm organizing, I'm making things look pretty, and that's just kind of lost time. So yeah, for me, the Google Docs, I also lost a manuscript once, like in its entirety, because it was on a device and I wasn't storing it in the cloud. I was using Word, and yeah, that device died. And so I will never, ever, ever, ever not put something in the cloud now. So that's a really, so even if you're writing in something else, do your backups, because that's.
Yeah, I always do backups. Now, also keep in mind
from the days of
I don't write in my complete manuscript. I write a chapter at a time. The chapter is its wholly owned entity, and then I add the chapter to the main document. And we'll back up into OneDrive, or you can back up into Dropbox, however you want to do it. But my usually the full document is kind of safely tucked away elsewhere, and chapter by chapter is what I work on. I don't write a full.
See, that's the other reason because I used to have Liquid Story Binder, and that's the other reason I didn't like that, because it wrote chapter by chapter. I like it my one long book, as far as I'm concerned, just flowing into each other.
Yeah, it all depends on how you write, right?
Which is the other thing about Google Docs. It is great because when Google Docs starts to lag on me really badly when I'm getting towards the end of the book, I know I've really written too long of the book.
Or you need better internet.
That too.
Okay, Tammy, you've got to pick questions.
I can only see chat when somebody comments, and I can pull it up and flick up and down.
Can you see the dog?
No.
No, that was a question for you, Tam.
Can you see the dog? Hold on, I'll see where he is. I'll be back. Let's continue with our dog. Jack, oh no, people have laughed. Jack. Apparently you cannot see the dog, he just ran for his life.
Love that. Jack. No. Oh God. Jax is a staffy that was adopted by Tam and her mom. We all have dogs. I have a potato Karen terrorist who is an old man, and he's not willing to be picked up and cuddled at the moment. So you'll have to be happy with Badger. And Bru has a delightful rage snossage named Grunt, and his big younger sister, hound, coonhound, Walker Tree and Walker hound. Lils, who's delightful.
She's delightful.
We may or may not see the dog because he thinks I'm going to give him a bath, so he's run away.
You didn't bring a treat?
He doesn't care. If he thinks there's a bath, that's how I got him into the bath the last 2 times. He's wise to it now. When you have a white dog, he needs baths a lot.
And sunscreen.
Oh yeah, no, he's not coming.
All right, we'll pretend like he isn't. Okay, somebody pick a question. La 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 la. Do you have tips? Oh, research. Oh wow, research.
Do as much research as you need to write the book you want to write. You can have, which is ridiculous because I do far more, but you can get lost. You can get so lost down the rabbit hole of, I might need to know about, the burial rites of the 10 people, but you don't really need to know that until you get to the point in the book where you need to know it. So start writing the book. When you're writing, see what research you need to do. Do
not use research as an info dump. you can always tell an author that's done a lot of research, and I read one book and I'm like, obviously this author has done research on arrow tips because they've given me 4 paragraphs about an arrow tip instead of just shooting the arrow.
Yeah. I've done research and I've found something out that's really interesting, and I've been desperate to find a way to put it into the book. And I haven't usually, but you know, sometimes you find something out that's so interesting you just want to wedge it in there, whether it fits or not.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes that kind of stuff, the research you do that doesn't make it onto the page, but influences what's on the page. That's what I go to for my when I'm doing my promo tours and stuff. You know, when you have to, because that's a part of being an author that is really difficult. Like, you've written this book. And that's what your passion is to write the book. Your passion is not necessarily to edit the book and then market the book and continue marketing the book. So yeah, I try to save things like that for the promo, the marketing tours, because then you can kind of do an info dump post about your arrowheads and the research you did, but it's not clouding up the book.
Because it's hard. The blog tours are always really hard for me because the Northern Irish people are apparently notorious for not liking to blow their own trumpet and things, which is rubbish when you've met any of them down the pub. But we don't say we're really brilliant at this. We say, but we're all right. We're all right. We can turn our hands to it. And you can't do that when you're doing a blog tour. You have to sort of try and big the book up, which always feels like bigging yourself up, and it's really hard. But it's one of the things that I've struggled with most in the transition, because fanfic, it's word of mouth. People come round, they say, oh yeah, this is good, and you don't really have to go out there and sort of say, you know what you should do? You should read my book because my book's good, which is awful.
Oh,
my book isn't awful, but
that gave me an aneurysm.
I know, it was, yeah.
Yeah, we're Asian, so cheating. No.
It's physically painful for me sometimes. Yeah, to try to take on that cheerleader role for my own stuff, or even see somebody else cheerleading it. I'm like, oh no, I could recommend 20 books that are better than mine, and that's always my my go-to there. But yeah, so that's just something. I saw a question, writing tips that no one knows, but everyone should know. And we talked about this a little bit, I think yesterday in one of the panels. Every author I know, about halfway through, maybe not even 20% in, you will go from, I'm excited about this project, this is great, this is going to be so good, to you hit that 20, 30,000 word mark and you hate everything. It is horrible. I don't know why I was writing this. These characters are flat. My plot doesn't make sense. And I have a lot of manuscripts that stalled there. But if you can push through that, I promise you that when you get, to the last quarter of the book, suddenly you get that love again. And you're almost always completely wrong, in that middle part where it's like, oh, it's horrible. It's not horrible. You're just tired. You're overwhelmed. You're trying to think to the next step. So just don't let yourself get stalled out there. And I get a lot of hate for this, but when I get stalled, I don't write linearly. I'll jump ahead. If 3 scenes later is what's exciting, I'll go write that. And it kills Rhys.
Yeah, it would kill me too. I once left the sex because I was traveling with my mother and I didn't want to write the sex scene while my mom was sitting opposite me. So I was like, yes, I'll come back to that later. And I had to come back to it at the end, and I would genuinely rather have chewed off a finger than had to write that scene, because the impetus of it in my head, the impetus of the push of the rest of the book that had made this the point where this was going to happen had just gone. So it was just like coming in cold and performing on stage. It was really hard. But then Andy Lee, she writes like that. She writes in just chunks and then knits it all together at the end. And, people can't tell them apart once they go to print.
Yeah, it's not, obviously you go back. I do that with research too. I'll research what I need to know before a book. But once I'm writing, it's like, okay, I need to know what, this particular thing would look like, or this particular word I can't think of. I will just make myself a note in there that says, you need to fix this later, and go on, because I could lose the whole day falling into the research trap and going deeper and deeper for a throwaway line. So I don't have the discipline to try to bust through writer's block or to research something when I'm in the middle of writing. So I have to leave that to the end. Or, I've had a book that I think it sat unfinished for 2 years, one of my first novels, because I just needed to research, one thing, and it was just felt overwhelming. And so I didn't. And so I skipped it, 2 years later, picked it back up, skipped over that, finished the book, and then was able to fill in those places. But, it's so difficult because our brain throws up these blockages and it lies to you and says, well, you can't do this, or this is insurmountable. So for me, I just move around it, get to a part I'm excited about, and write so that I don't get stopped.
5-minute warning, just a quick heads up.
Very quick tip for writers: have a ritual. I have a writing nook downstairs, and that's brilliant, and I can set aside time to write. Not everybody can, but if you have a ritual that you practice before you write, and every time just before you write, you have a cup of coffee, you put on a special cardigan, whatever it is you do, that will trick your brain into believing that it's time to write, and it will help you write even if you're in a hellish place, because it's just habit. Habit is an amazing tool.
Somebody asked, have you ever felt burnt out when writing, and what do you do when you're tired of the story you're working on? I've had a series of deaths this past year. Very close people, people I'm very close to. My sister passed away in November. It's been a struggle, and I think a lot of times when you feel burnt out, it's because you're emotionally overwhelmed. And the best thing to do, I think, is to give yourself some grace and give yourself some space to sort of be okay. And thank you, Evelyn. It's like, and Markia said, oh, I've collected so much data, how do I start? It's when you get overwhelmed by the enormity of it. And I would say, start small, and this goes back to, writing tips. Start small. Who's my main character? Who are my 2 main characters? Take little chunks, take little bites, and then work outward. You could write a first draft that's maybe very sketchy, maybe, just 4 pages of what you want to happen, if that works for you, and then expand it out. Tammy and I can't do that, because that's, for us, it's like, well, the book's written, we're done.
Yeah.
Or maybe
say, well, we're not interested in that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what you need. Maybe you just need to finish those 3 pages, and then, that leads me to a next book.
I think the biggest writing tip that anybody ever needs to know is that just because it's worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Yeah.
You just have to find what works for you and what makes sense for you. And don't worry if other people's techniques don't work for you. We still like Bru, even though she doesn't write linearly.
Yeah, we still love Bru. If this is I think maybe the last question. And Tammy, did you already do a thingy?
I did. I picked one earlier. I first.
Okay. I'm actually going to give Galadrima this one as well, because I think all of us can speak to this. If I want to risk writing a story placed in a country I don't even know, is academic research enough? I feel like the cultural gap is too big, and there are things about people that you don't find in books or movies. I can tell you, I know absolutely nothing about being white in America. Yet I write white characters. And I actually do research because I don't know some of the cultural norms. Some of those research things include casseroles. What is it like to grow up in Chicago? What is it like, these things? I have deep interest in music and the blues, and I'm writing in my own country, and there are areas that I know nothing about. Is academic research enough? Yes. But I would also say use YouTube. Find people from that area and watch those stories. listen to their accents, see what's behind them. Maybe get some food and eat the food. You know, don't just immerse yourself in the words of that space, but actually go out and do some cultural research, and it would enrich things. Tammy's in Ireland writes it about America.
The tips I would give are sensitivity readers aren't just for, you know, big, you know, race and neurotypicality, neurodivergence. It's for anything. So if you're writing about a culture you don't know anything about, ask somebody from that culture to have a look at it. You know, ask, do not get offended if they say no. But if you ask somebody, could you have a look at this, see if it reads right, you know, people are surprisingly eager to help and happy to help if you're trying to get something right. There's also tricks that you can use if you want to write about somewhere that you're not from. Maybe your character isn't from there either, they're visiting. You know, you can write about, instead of writing about the country, write about a tiny little area where you're going to settle in, and that's where your focus is smaller, your research pool is smaller, and it's a lot more manageable. And finally, just be, if you do write it and it goes wrong, you just have to be prepared for maybe you're going to get some people going, you got that wrong. Nobody would ever. I always think about this one crime author she'd written a book and it was really popular, it was really well received, but 3 people wrote to her and said motorcycles don't go into reverse, because she had a motorcycle and she'd had somebody throw it in reverse and back out of a drive because she didn't ride motorcycles. And she said, and that was what I learned. And from then on, I knew that motorcycles didn't go in reverse, except they do now. You can have some. So if you get something wrong, learn from it. Bru?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, yeah, we're almost out of time. You can use things that like that, researching that microcosm. And then it always helps if your character, like Tam said, isn't from that area, because then they can be learning and it's not an info dump. They're learning about, you know, where they are. But always, I wouldn't try to set something in another country with somebody in a profession I didn't know and a bunch of like, try to limit. Like if, say, the setting is someplace you're not familiar with, make other things that are involved in that something you are familiar with, so that you have, you know, comfort things to fall back onto. It makes it easier, I think, than just saying, well, I'm going to write about a doctor who lives in, you know, Bosnia, and you've never worked in medicine, you've never been to Europe, you have no idea, you know, what you're doing. And just be gracious when people point things out if it's wrong, even if they're not right. I had a book that was set in an area of California that is kind of a food desert in terms of being able to grow things, and it was an orchard, and I got a bunch of hate mail from this woman. Like, she's like, I made an account on this site just to tell you how awful you are. And so, you know, I couldn't get back to her and say, yeah, I know if you read the book, you'd see that the orchard was failing because it's not a place that it would grow well. So just, you know, give yourself, I think, that grace. And if you make a mistake or somebody perceives a mistake, just move on. It's not, you know, worth losing your sleep over.
I think we hit our time, didn't we?
Yes, we will unfortunately have to end it here, but I want to give a huge thank you to our wonderful authors and panelists, Bru Baker, T.A. Moore, and Rhys Ford. Thank you so much for that wonderful insight and advice. I know everyone got a lot out of that. I know I learned so many new things I didn't even know. Gift card winners, you have been contacted by me, so we will be coordinating that.
Yay!
So just want to say another big thank you to everybody for attending, and I hope you have a good rest of your convention. And thank you again, authors. That was wonderful.
Thank you. I'm glad everyone came in, and I hope you guys enjoyed FujoCon. Really, really take advantage of it. It's a really great con.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
Meeting.